911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, and includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised. These stories are based on real-life EMS, military, and healthcare experiences. Calls are real, providers are real, names and details have been changed to protect privacy. They may be disturbing to some and are definitely inappropriate for HR department. Any medical or mental health discussion is personal experience, not protocol. Use your damn brain. Follow your local guidelines, and when in doubt, call med control. If you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist, or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org.
All right. You're listening to Dispatch Dysfunctional, where chaos has a pulse and the quiet after a call is sometimes the loudest sound in the room. Today's guest has seen both sides of the badge and the fight to survive it. 17 years in law enforcement, corrections, crimes against children, the FBI task force before trauma and addiction nearly took everything from him. He's now helping others come back from that same darkness as a missions advocate at Warrior's Heart. Robert Greer, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Man, I really appreciate being on.
Robert, I've introduced you, but only you can really tell your story. Before we dive in, what do you want listeners to take away from today's conversations?
As long as you're drawing breath, you still have fight in you. A lot of us kind of lose our purpose when that job ends, but your job will be posted long before your obituary. You know, there's so much life after the badge. So much.
Yes, sir. And that's powerful, and that's a perfect place to start. So let's go back to the night everything broke for you. Robert, I know you've shared your story before where one night everything broke for you. The badge, the bottle, the evidence, the silence. For those hearing your story for the first time, can you take us there and explain it?
Yeah, in the quick version of that story, there was a lot that led up to it, but essentially I was at my rock bottom. You know, rock bottom is difficult, but it can be a beautiful place as well because the only place to go is up from there. But at that stage, at that point in my life, it was August 1st of 2020. The wife and I had separated. I'd already lost my job 2 years before. We'd lost the house, living with her parents. I was just spiraling. And the night before, I had made this somewhat poetic Facebook post. At least I thought it was. But, you know, I was a bit impaired when I made it. And I was trying to be poetic. She read it and sent me an email that day saying that she was in fear for her safety and filing for separation. And, you know, we were already separated. I'd been moved out for about a month. And I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a buddy's house. You know, I was going to be his handyman, fixing the place up so he could rent it out.
Right.
And that night, man, it was just as low as it could possibly be. I was all alone. I'd isolated myself for a couple of years previous to that anyway. So I just didn't feel like there was anybody I could reach out to, you know? So in one hand, literally, you know, in one hand was the gun. The other hand was the phone. So I had to make a choice.
Well, you made the right one. You're still here with us.
Absolutely.
That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest takeaway from all this is you always make that choice. Make sure you make the right one. The world is never better.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You know, we all reach that. A lot of us reach that point, and we consider committing the ultimate act, right? And I just couldn't do that. You know, I was listening to a podcast at that time called Friends in Recovery. And for those familiar with it, it's a guy from Jersey and it's another guy from, I think, Massachusetts, who was a cop turned into a clinician. And they do an excellent podcast. And I was listening to it. One of the things they said on one of those episodes was suicide is hereditary. You know, oftentimes if a parent does it, the kids will follow in their steps. That resonated with me, you know. For our kids, you know, we're the toughest some bitches they know.
Right.
And if we can't take it, if we can't go through it, what chance do they have? That would be the thought process. I just couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. Plus, I wanted a better life, and I knew it was out there, and it was possible. So I had to fight back. And, you know, that night I picked up the phone and started making some calls.
Hell yeah. I'm glad you're still here with us, man.
Thank you.
You've worked nearly every side of the job. What part started wearing you down first?
Yeah. So my career was odd in some ways. It was kind of backwards in some ways, right? What I mean by that is with most sheriff's offices, you start off in the jail, you work your way to patrol, then you work your way to detectives, you know, you move up in that fashion. And due to some policy changes within the agency that I worked for, I went straight from the jail to detectives. So I started getting burned out kind of fast in a way. Initially, I went to financial crimes and I was doing quite well. But then I got assigned to the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and that began a hell of a grind on me, because I did that for 5 years I was in financial crimes and doing the task force part-time. They would have us do it 1 week out of the month. But it was pretty intense when we would do it, right? So I still work financial crimes and doing that. And then after about 16 months or so, they transferred me over to youth services full time. So I was doing it all the time, not just the task force, but also regularly assigned crimes in the parish. And it began to wear on me pretty heavy. And there were some cases that went bad, some arrests that I was unable to make that really stuck with me. So it really began to grind on me there, because I was seeing the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life, hundreds of thousands of pictures, thousands of videos of just some really awful stuff. And what the person I was having to portray online was detestable, because one of my profiles was of an adult single father that was a perpetrator to his children. And it was, I was able to make a lot of arrests with that, catch some of the more crafty, I guess you could say, pedophiles, but that was difficult. And it got to the point where I just could not do it anymore. I couldn't look at the pictures. I couldn't hear the audio. I couldn't interview the kids. I was, trained for child and adolescent forensic interviewing by the FBI. And sometimes I do those interviews myself, and I couldn't do it anymore, So it really wore me down during that time frame. And then I went to patrol and started seeing all the other stuff, So, yeah. But believe it or not, it was a welcome relief when I left youth services and left the task force and went to patrol.
I would imagine that's a lot of, that's a lot. I can only imagine the toll that would take on you mentally, especially if you have kids and, families, and that's got to be hard.
Yeah, and there was a lot of other aspects to it. When people found out what you did for a living, investigate that type of crime, for whatever reason, they felt safe and comfortable around me enough to disclose what happened to them when they were younger. Not necessarily in the effort to get it prosecuted or investigated, but just feeling like they felt safe enough to air it out. And it was, I felt honored in a way that they felt that safe around me, and I wasn't going to deny them an opportunity to heal, but man, it was a lot. I dealt with it all day at work, and this is stuff that would happen at church sometimes.
Oh, wow.
People that I would see at church. Yeah. And in other areas. Yeah, it was a lot.
Your work was wound up going into your personal life quite a bit.
A lot. Yeah. A heck of a lot.
So here's a question that follows up with that. So how does burnout hide behind routine and law enforcement?
Well, that's an interesting question. When I was, I guess, younger with the department, I still had that energy and that fire. I would refer to some of the older deputies that seemed to be burned out as shade tree deputies. You see them parked underneath the shade tree, not really being proactive with anything, and just kind of hiding from work. And eventually I was just kind of beaten down enough that I was one of those shade tree deputies, so the burnout can present in a couple different ways. Can also present with the saltiness, if you will. Somebody's just becoming excessively grumpy, which was definitely me to a T, So there's a lot of ways that burnout presents itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. So you said silence was your worst partner. What did that isolation look like day to day?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? The internet kind of cut out a little there.
Yes, sir. You said silence was your worst partner. What did that isolation look like day to day?
So it progressed, I guess you could say, over the years. The shade tree deputy that I mentioned, part of that shade tree for me was a quiet, isolated spot to cry, because there was a time I don't know what happened. I don't know. Yeah, I guess just choking it back all those years. I would be out somewhere in the parish underneath the shade tree, just crying my eyes out, not really understanding why. You're trained to be stoical and seen, hold back your emotions, but let it out later. But later never really happens because you're, on to the next call.
Yeah.
So it would come out at times like that. So that was, part of the isolation and withdrawal, but it was also I was beginning to kind of distance myself from activities that had always brought me pleasure, been part of my life. Church, for example, began to, I couldn't show my face there, for a lot of reasons. So I decided not to go anymore. Withdrawing from family activities or, group friend activities and not returning calls, stuff like that. Excuse me. That's why I was still on the job and living in Shreveport. And then after I lost the career, I was terminated for policy violations, but all of them were a result of the PTS and the substance use. I isolated even more. We were in a bankruptcy because alcoholics can't manage money for damn, right?
Right.
So we had to surrender the house. We moved in with our parents, and that summer I had been awarded a small disability through the pension fund. We were moving. I was turning 40, so I had this big party, invited all my work friends, and they didn't show. They had enough of my shit, right? They were kind of distancing themselves too. So they didn't show. So that made me isolate even worse, because I had this, negative cognition. I just continued to berate myself, in my head verbally that, I'm worthless and no good. Nobody likes me. And, that kind of confirmed it to a large degree. Now I take responsibility for a lot of that, but still. And when we moved down to her parents' house, I was off social media. I wasn't hanging out with anybody other than family. And that was it. I was just so withdrawn. I stayed away from everybody, isolated a lot. And then, of course, when she booted me out, I had nobody else. I did have family in the area, but I couldn't go live with them, but with my habits, with my issues, with my substances. So I just took that as a sign, stayed in that house by myself most of the time.
Yeah.
It was a lonely place.
I bet. And that actually brings me to my next question, really, is when did you realize that the Brotherhood behind, law enforcement, EMS, and all that wasn't actually going to save you this time?
Well, probably in August of 2018, when I had that little going away party, and nobody really showed. And that's when I really began to feel it. And I just felt like I wasn't part of that thin blue line anymore, that I wasn't part of the group, wasn't part of the Brotherhood. I guess it didn't really sink in that I had to save myself until I finally picked up the phone, that nobody else was going to help, that I had to do it on my own.
I've been there. I actually left the ambulance to go offshore, and all the people I used to talk to have now secluded me. Don't know why, don't know what for, but like you said, I made a phone call to a few of them and nothing ever happened. It's like when we better ourselves, no one else is happy for you. And that goes on both sides of the token. Is when we see each other struggling, we don't seem to help as much as we should. The partners on the trucks, the partners in the cars, your partner period should be able to notice any slight differentials in you, any slight changes, to know something is bothering you, to know something needs to change, or to know that there is something wrong that you won't talk about. And they should be able to be the ones to get you help,
Exactly. And I will say that the tide has been changing over the years, and I'm happy to see it. And I'm also happy to be a part of it. Being able to go back and participate in Louisiana with the state police for a post-critical incident seminar, a 3.5-day program where first responders come in and, just have a little bit of an introduction to EMDR, massage, yoga, stuff like that. A lot of the stuff that we do at Warriors Heart, they get a little bit of an introduction to it. And it's great for me to go back and connect with those guys and share my story with them and show them that there's a future out there, but also watch out for these things that could tear you down, right? So the tide is changing in that regard, and that thin blue line has taken another shape, because there's the hard chargers that are on the line, and then there's the others who have been there, done that, and are now helping the others. In the warrior community, it's, the older statesman, I think, as Save a Warrior would put it. It's the older statesman. It's almost like one of the chiefs in a Native American tribe that has been in those battles before, and now he's helping the others make it through. So it kind of takes a different shape these days, but the tide is definitely changing. I hear from peer support officers and programs all the time, trying to get somebody into treatment, trying to get them some help. So that's a good thing. It's a good thing these days. We are being more open about it.
So how did you find Warrior's Heart, and what did walking through those doors feel like?
Purely by accident. Purely by accident. Let me say that. So that night, I mentioned, I've been listening to that podcast. That podcast was sponsored by a place called the Genesis House in Florida. So that night I picked up the phone, and obviously that was the first place I called. I didn't know anything about rehab. Where do I go? What do I do? I had no insurance at all, because when I was terminated, I was fired and advised to apply for disability through our pension fund. It's a 75% disability pension, which is a little over $2,000 a month for a family of 5 and no insurance, right? So I didn't have many options there. When I called, they wanted to help, but it cost about $10,000 for their 30-day program, which, isn't bad, but I was about 40 grand short. That math just don't math.
Right.
So I couldn't go there, but, fortunately there were some good people there, and they said, hey, if, maybe, call this guy named Matty Fiorenza out in California, see if he can help you out. Now, Matty is also known in the warrior community as well. Anaheim firefighter, went through some rough times. I believe he has a program out there in California, but he's also an advocate to help others. So I called him, wasn't able to, based on that referral, wasn't able to get into his program either. But he said, hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to call this guy named Michael Dell. He's with Warrior's Heart. I want you to call him tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in the morning. This is like Saturday night, right? He's telling me to call him on a Sunday morning.
Okay.
And so I pull up the website, and I'm like, man, this looks like a place for military. I'm not a vet. I can't go there. And he's like, no. It's for cops and first responders too. You should check into it, look at it. So I did, looked at it. Okay. I'll call the guy tomorrow morning. And, I'm thinking it's going to be a call taker, right? But Matty had prepped Mike and let him know I was going to be called. I called at 10 o'clock. And when he answered the phone, he goes, hi, Robert, I'm Michael. I've been waiting for your call. What can I do to help you out?
Damn.
Well, holy shit. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know what it was about that, but I just started just slinging snot, crying everywhere, ugly crying, right? And just telling my story. Hey, please help me. Oh my God, I'm dying. That sort of thing, right?
Right.
I laid it all out there. And okay. So he did what he could to help me. And, I had to get some foundations to help out, but I did what it took. I started a GoFundMe. I applied for foundations, and I was starting to get back on Facebook again and share my story. And a foundation reached out, helped, throw a little extra in to, help out with my out-of-pocket expenses. So, yeah, and within about 2 weeks, I was there. I checked in on August 18th of 20.
That's awesome.
At the height of COVID.
Oh,
Yeah.
that must have been fun.
Oh, it was great. I went to San Antonio. I lived in Louisiana. It's about an 8-hour drive. So drove to San Antonio, had to get a COVID test. So I had to stay the night in downtown San Antonio at a hotel, one of the only ones open. Got a COVID test the next morning, went and drove around, looked at the bustling metropolis of Bandera, Texas. A little small place, but I love it. It's great. Did a few other things, had my last 2 beers ever at TJ's at the Old Forge on Main Street in Bandera, and checked in that evening at 1800.
And you haven't looked back since. That's awesome.
Well, I ended up staying over there about 7.5 months. I did the 6-week inpatient and then went straight into sober living, and did 2 months. I stayed in sober living for 5 months. And while I was there, I did 2 months of IOP. I got a service dog, full service dog named Baby. She's probably snoring on the couch over there somewhere. Through the program, and the dogs did cost extra, but again, I was able to work some foundations and some other friends forgotten about it helped. They threw in on it, and so I participated in everything they had to offer. But I at that point, I was so desperate for change. I was so sick of who I'd become that I was willing to do whatever. Initially when I went in, I was hoping to save the marriage, but she made it pretty clear about halfway through treatment that wasn't going to happen. So, it was at that point I dove in. And, that's what I keep telling people. You dive into an AA program and do everything that's required of you. And, do the therapy that places like Warriors Heart offers, and you're going to be successful. You put everything you have into that, like you did your career. You're willing to do whatever in the hell it took for your career. Yeah. Some really crazy stuff, some difficult stuff, some hard stuff, just for that career that threw you out, that, you're no longer a part of. If you could do the same, put the same effort in for yourself, you're going to be successful. You're going to heal. You're going to have that better life.
I've seen a lot of great successes out of AA programs, and firsthand knowledge it's a tremendous program. It's not as sought out as it should be, or recognized, or even appreciated, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. My dad was in NA and AA. Before he passed, he relapsed, but I was proud of him. 20 years clean and sober. So
that's fantastic. And you know well that AA is just it's not just about drinking and not drinking and drugging. I'm trying to say that right. AA is not about just not drinking and drugging. It teaches you how to be a part of society again, how to be happy again, how to be grateful again, how to love again, how to deal with anger. Finances will begin to figure themselves out. All kinds of positives will happen from getting yourself straight, and AA can do that. That's part of our program, and that we are provisionally licensed at Warriors Heart as substance use disorder. So 12 steps is definitely a part of our program.
To me, we talked about Brotherhood earlier. It's funny, the AA, seeing it as a kid and teenager, watching my dad in AA, I've noticed he was retired Coast Guard, so retired military. The AA family was more tightly knit than his military family ever was. And it was amazing to see how willing those group of people are to help their own. And, it's not like everyone thinks it is. It's not, they don't beat you down. They welcome you with open arms, and you're there as a person. You're not there as a number.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can't say enough good things about the AA group. And when it comes to work, when it comes to career, they'll put a uniform and a body in that same uniform the next day if they need to. And you can't fault them for it. I've done it too. When other guys have moved on, quit, got fired or whatever, I don't remember ever talking to them after that. We're a work acquaintance,
Right.
So, but with AA, there's, I still talk to people and hang out with people that I went to rehab with 5 years ago.
Exactly. And it makes a great bond as well, So speaking of your recovery, so what does the first week of recovery look like in your mind? Is it messy? Is it hopeful? Or is it both?
The next what of recovery?
The first week.
Oh, the first week of recovery. What did it look like for me?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know anybody on this planet that could say it went really well. Excuse me, I'm coughing a little here. Yep. I was angry. Angry doesn't even begin to describe it. I had so much pent up emotion. Plus, I was on a particular antidepressant that contributed to that effector, and when you mix a lot of alcohol and pain pills and everything with it, it's just a toxic cocktail, man. I was, and that's a lot of the reason why the wife had to ask me to leave, because everybody had to walk on eggshells around me. I wasn't physically abusive, just verbally abusive.
Right.
But, I was an unpleasant person. That's what led to my undoing in a lot of ways. In that first week of, I'm having to feel all these emotions. I don't like this. Right. So it was difficult, Plus, I'm at the beginning stages of a divorce, but I'm hoping to save it. 500 miles away from the people I know and love. I'm with a whole bunch of people I feel like I don't belong around, you know? So that first week was tricky. I can't, I've heard this is the only place I've ever been, right, as far as rehab. But I've heard plenty of stories from lots of people I know that have been to other places. And all I can say is thank God I was there, man. Thank God I was at Warriors Heart because, man, if I had been in one of those other facilities, it would have got ugly. I mean, really ugly. It would not have gone well. But they loved on me. They took care of me, and people kept telling me, welcome home. At first, it pissed me off because I'm like, hey, I got the bank has my house, and I got kicked out of somebody else's.
Right.
So I was angry. I cussed a lot of people out. There was a lot of people afraid of me. They called a lot of codes while I was there.
I gotcha. So during your recovery or after your recovery, what was the first time you laughed again and actually meant it?
Yeah, there was a lot of times where I did laugh while I was there at Warriors Heart. I mean, you know what? A lot of times, and I really meant it. What a lot of us miss is that brotherhood, right? Whether you're military, EMT, law enforcement, firefighter, you miss the brotherhood. You miss the dudes that you're around, right? So at first I thought, I don't belong here because I was just a cop and all these guys are military guys. But man, they changed my thinking on that 100%. And the camaraderie was there. I got there in August, and Warriors Heart, Texas has a pool. And where you got a pool, you got pool volleyball. When you got pool volleyball, you got a lot of shit talking with vets and first responders and a hell of a lot of fun.
Okay, I bet that was a blast.
Oh, every single day, man. I came out of there with a really good tan. So yeah, I laughed a lot. There was a lot of stuff to laugh at, but at the same time, we were doing some heavy duty mental health work on ourselves. So we needed to laugh, but you know how we are with that dark humor. We have to laugh as often as we can to ward off those demons. So yeah, it was while I was there, honestly.
I got you. So now you've progressed, and now you're actually the person who answers the 24-hour hotline for Warriors Heart. What's the responsibility like that now?
It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I'm grateful to be a part of somebody else's recovery, to be able to show them the way, to be able to help them get there. But part of it, when you're really trying to help somebody, is getting down in that hole with them and helping them get out of that hole. And when you get down in that hole, you get a little dirty sometimes. Not all the calls that we have are easy, There's a lot of times, just a couple of days ago, where I was on the phone with a suicidal vet for about an hour and a half. So it does get difficult from time to time. But we focus on the wins. In recovery, we focus on the wins. At Warriors Heart, we focus on the wins. And the ones that we can help and get them into treatment, it's great. It's wonderful being able to help guys out, because when I lost my career, all I wanted to do was to help guys like us and say, hey, there's another way. But I didn't have anything to offer at that time because I hadn't fixed myself yet. So I damn sure couldn't fix anybody else. So worked on myself first. And then when I was ready, God sent me here, and I'm helping others fix themselves. And it's great when you help pull somebody out of that fire. You work with them on the phones, you build a relationship with them, and then they check in, and you go meet them at intake and hug their neck, and they cry on your shoulder. Dude, that is a good feeling. That is a really good feeling.
I bet that's got to be the best feeling in the world right there.
It is. And it's reminiscent of some of the wins that we had in law enforcement, when we could really help somebody. But I don't know, it somehow takes on a different meaning.
Yeah. So how do you stay grounded after hearing their stories that mix with your own?
I've done a lot of work on myself, like I said, first and foremost. And I've turned a lot of those stories, those memories, from an active memory into, a stored memory. The active memories are the ones that bother us. That's one of the things that EMDR does, for example. EMDR is a form of therapy. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but eye movement desensitization reprocessing, I think it is.
You're right.
And, I've done a lot of work with healing those wounds where they're not quite as active, But in order to stay grounded, Baby is my service dog, Baby. She is a Warrior's Heart dog, and she does have permission to come in the office with me. So she's always in the office, and she's always helping out the other advocates too, you know. And if I need to get up and take a walk, I'll grab her leash and, you know, get up and take her on a walk around, you know, the field out there to just kind of de-stress. And also, you know, I still love cigars, so I may go out to my truck and puff on a cigar, you know. But you know, in all the treatment that I've done, we've learned a lot of those techniques: meditation, mindfulness, positive affirmations, those sorts of things, breathing exercises to help stay grounded and to relieve the stress. Do I employ all of them all the time? No. I stick with some, you know, but most importantly, if it is something like that, I'll go talk to somebody. You know, I'll go pull Aaron aside and say, man, that was a rough call. You know, we'll talk about it, or, you know, talk to Ingrid or Mike or somebody, you know, so I'm talking about it, and that's what helps the most.
I think that's what a lot of people need to understand as well, is you're not weak if you talk. You know, you're weak if you don't talk about it. If you try to hold it in yourself, and it overcomes you. You know, there's no weakness in admitting you need help. That's one of the biggest things that I took from AA from my dad, is there's nothing wrong with admitting you need help. There's nothing wrong with getting help. You know, as you said earlier, is there are people trained better than us in cognitive functions and all that can help us with, like you said, EMDR, yoga, you know, and other capacities to be able to deal with the traumas that we have. And that's what a lot of our suicides, in my personal belief, is about, is we don't break down enough because of the old mindsets of, you don't talk about it, you just grow with it, you know?
Right. And I was a victim of that mindset myself. You know, I felt like it was weak, like I couldn't talk about it. The people above me with the rank and the experience, you know, they were stoic. They didn't talk about that shit. They just drank it down. So, you know, we learned from those guys. But in recovery, we do learn a different lesson. Like you said, it's not weakness to ask for help. It's strength.
Yeah.
You know, in law enforcement, you know, day one academy stuff, they tell you, ain't no Lone Wolf McQuade out here. You know, you're not Walker, Texas Ranger. If you need help, you better call for backup. Even if you don't need help yet, get somebody started just in case, right? The reason when we don't do it is because we can't see our enemy, but our enemy is us. And that is the toughest enemy. That demon in our head is the toughest one that we have ever battled, because it knows our next move. It knows all our weaknesses, knows how to push all of our buttons. So when you really begin to go after that demon and fight that fight, and then you win, holy shit, then you know some real strength. That is real strength. And anybody that's been on that side of that fight knows exactly what I'm talking about. You will never be stronger than when you go to war with that demon and win, right? So it damn sure ain't weakness, because it's a hell of a fight. That's why we say, you know, pick up that 8,000 pound phone. You know, we become a power lifter because we don't want to do it. You know, it's hard. But that's when you show real strength.
Yes, sir. So what do people misunderstand about first responders and addiction?
Interesting. I don't know. You know, right now is not a good time to be a cop. You know, I'm saying that to encompass all first responders, but mainly the cops are the targets right now, and cops are being vilified as, you know, evil people. There's a large part of the public that absolutely do not understand what we do and see and deal with, you know. So I think if, you know, we were viewed as alcoholics, addicts, whatever, then they would probably, you know, support that idea, or, you know, be in favor of that. I don't know how I'm trying to say it, but that's a tough question. I don't know.
I think what you're trying to say, in my opinion, on the, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're trying to say we're normal people, just like the regular, you know, everyday person is. We're not invincible. We're not heroes. We are just like everyone else.
Absolutely. We're subject to the same faults that everybody else has. And a lot of statistics have been coming out here lately. I've been seeing a lot of posts about it, where the average American citizen may see 1 to 2 critical incidents, or experience 1 to 2 critical incidents in their entire life. And in a 30-year career, most first responders will experience hundreds.
Yeah.
And it's tough to deal with that. And a lot of us have a habit of, or a lot of people, I should say, not just first responders, a lot of people in general have a habit of numbing out. Even civilians, have a habit of numbing out from the things that they struggle with. But you're right, we are just people. And if you've been in the rooms of AA, you know that this is a disease that does not discriminate, from the average guy to presidents and kings, all the way up, runs the gamut.
Yes, sir. So what keeps you showing up for the next phone call?
Fear that I'm going to let somebody down, it's hard to disengage sometimes. But I have to have hope that there is hope. I have to be available to others when they extend their hand. It's like that AA saying, when I always mess it up. I'm terrible at quotes, but when somebody needs help, I want the hand of AA to be there. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
I take that to heart, not just because of AA, but also, it's part of the job. But even if it wasn't part of the job, I'd still do it. I'd still be available to somebody. And there's a lot of times when I'm not at work and I'm still sharing the message of recovery. I'm still telling people about different programs they could go to get some healing, because I believe in it and I'm passionate about it. I know that there's a better way. And I know there's a lot of people out there struggling. In some ways, it's almost like that religious zealot, right? And when he gets the Holy Ghost, right, he's going to tell everybody about it. I'm not quite that bad, but I am going to keep showing up for those who do need help. I'm going to do everything I can in that regard. Now, at some point, we have to take care of ourselves, because that same mindset when I worked juvenile sex crimes, I can't let anybody down. I can't miss that next call. It burned me out a little bit. So the correlation here is self-care, right? Back then, I didn't do self-care. Now I do. So I can continue to show up for that next call. It's the same thing as a first responder. You have got to start taking care of yourself so you can be of service to others. You're numbing out if you have those bad habits, if you're not going to the gym, if you're not doing all the healthy things that you need, going to counseling, downloading, you're not going to be able to show up for the next call.
We can't help ourselves. We can't help anyone else till we help ourselves.
Absolutely.
So that brings me to my next question, in all honesty, is, what does hope sound like when you hear it on the phone?
Tears.
Tears
of joy. Yeah, tears of joy. There's been, of course, I told you how I did it, when I called Mike, but there's been times when, somebody was struggling to find funding because they didn't have insurance and the VA was letting them down. And I was able to help them find some funding, and I call them up and say, hey, man, we got it done. We got it taken care of. You're coming home. And the tears of joy, man, that is the best form of hope you will ever hear, and then when they show up and cry those same tears, yeah, that's hope. That's a lot of hope.
That's phenomenal right there, especially y'all working it like that to be able to help people that much. That's tremendous. I don't even have a word for that. That's amazing. So
we do everything that we can. If you participate in your own rescue, if you help us help you, we will do everything we possibly can to help you.
That's awesome. So how did recovery rebuild your family and your faith?
That took patience, right? And they say don't ever pray for patience, because God will give you the opportunity to learn it. Well, I did learn it. I did pray for it, and I did learn it. And it didn't really click initially, but, they kept saying, let go and let God. I didn't know what that meant. I kept asking people, kept asking my sponsor people, hey, what the hell does that mean? Let go and let God, right? I was a faithful man before, and then when things went downhill, I just turned my back on the church in general. So I was having a rough time with all that. And, like AA daily meditations that are put out, Tom Spooner, one of our co-founders, will also add his, statement to that. And in one of those I read one time, basically said, do the work on yourself and leave the results up to God. I'm like, well, holy shit. So you could have said that like a year ago, right? That would have made more sense. So I just started focusing on that, doing the work on myself and leaving the results up to God, because I can't force it. I can't, after a month of sobriety, go back to my family and say, I'm cured. love me again, right? Because our words
Right.
don't mean shit. It's actions. So I did the actions. I did what was required. I went to meetings. I went to meet with my sponsor. I did the steps. I went to other healing programs. I did sober living, IOP. I did everything I possibly could. And little by little, things began to return. You know, as the big book says, you know, these promises will come true, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work. But I had to continue to work on myself. And these things began to come back around, right? My children began to, trust me a little bit more and be a part of my life. You know, the wife, she and I, ex-wife now, were amicable, you know, but we're still parting ways. But at least we weren't at each other's throats. You know, I was able to make amends with a lot of people. And a lot of those, by the way, a lot of those people that I mentioned that I invited to my going away party that had ghosted me, you know, I was sharing my story. I was doing a podcast. A lot of those people came back, you know, because they were happy to see me doing well. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, it was great. But, you know, life slowly began to return. But when you have such huge failures, it takes a while to trust again, right? So we are driven by 1,000 forms of fear in our addictions. And I was scared of everything. I was scared of failure, scared of getting hurt again. But it took moving forward little by little to rebuild that faith, you know? And it took a faith in God to be able to restore that. And it happened in a dynamic way. You know, I again was sharing my story a little bit. I reconnected with one of the men from my church in Shreveport that I was close to a little bit before I went to treatment, and then while I was in sober living. And then I was having a rough morning out behind the sober living lodge and just prayed to God, hey, I need to hear something from you, man. I need something, you know, show me something. Nothing happened. You know, I'm out walking baby and by the river, and early in the morning, we were going to the Empty Cross in Kerrville, of all places, that morning. And on the way there, my phone rang, and it was Daryl from Trinity Heights Church in Shreveport calling and saying, man, I don't know what it was, but when I woke up this morning, it was like a neon sign in front of my face saying, call Robert, call Robert. I'm like, all right, God, I guess that'll do. Right. So started working a little bit harder on the relationship with God, you know, and, you know, that's part of the AA program as well, a relationship with your higher power. And yeah, it began to take shape and to take form all the way to the point where a couple of years later, when I'm looking for that next step, when I'm looking for purpose again, because I didn't like what I was doing for work, God kept saying, you need to go work at Warrior's Heart. No, that's not the right path. I know better than you, God. I want to stay here close to my kids. And at that time I was living with my mom, and then I moved in with my nephew. So, you know, I love him to death, but I didn't even have my own place. Right. But yeah, going to work at Warrior's Heart as a missions advocate, I had to talk myself into it for over a month, wore my sponsor out on that too. But that was another step in that building of faith and moving forward and conquering those fears that had built up for years. And then even in relationships, you know, I had to, dating relationships now that I'm divorced and all. And I've been in a relationship for a while with a great woman, you know, but it took a while of, you know, chopping away at that fear before I could really make any progress. But that's the thing, you know, we're an instant gratification, you know, population these days, especially first responders. You know, we want it right now. We're going to ask, we're going to tell, then we're going to make. God, I'm asking you for this. I'm telling you I want it. I'm fixing to make you give me a better life. Yeah, it don't work that way. Right. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but damn it if it ain't worth it. Moved over here. Financially, I'm doing better. Emotionally, I'm doing better. Mentally, I'm doing better. And 2 of the 3 kids now live with me. You know, they decided to come over here with me. Baby girl Gabby is still at home with mom, but she's young. She comes over and spends the summers with me. I mean, how much better can it be?
That's awesome. I'm so proud of you. That's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate
it. So what does a normal good day look for you now?
Normal good day is, you know, being able to answer those calls and to help people headed in the right direction, or to make a difference in somebody's life when they're at their darkest. to be able to be positive and be around other people, to send out my gratitude list to a certain group of folks, hit a meeting if I can. Usually that's on Tuesday nights with a local group that I go to. So just, and most importantly is not bringing it home with me, because there are, like I said, there are hard days, right? There are still losses. Unfortunately, we're in a life and death battle here. Not everybody makes it out. But I used to bring that home with me, and it would spill out on my family. And I've gotten really good at being able to leave it at work and come home with a different attitude. But that my day looks like that now. On an ideal day, I'll hit the gym before work a good day at the office, come home, hang out with the kids, cook supper, usual kind of thing, an ordinary life that has never been better.
That's awesome. So for the responder listening right now, sitting in their car with a bottle beside them, what do you want them to hear from you?
You're building your own prison. With that bottle, you are building your own prison. They kept saying you have to feel it to heal it. I hate cliches. I thought it was stupid, but damn it if it wasn't true, right? If you're numbing out, you are never going to get past it. Never. You're delaying it. In fact, it's like building a dam. More and more water is going to accrue behind that dam, and when it finally breaks, man, it's going to get nasty. It's going to get ugly. That bottle is what's doing it. We try to escape with that bottle. We try to numb out with it, or whatever our substances are. It never helps. It feels like it does in the moment, but man, there's always hell to pay.
Yes, sir. So what's your best advice for the friend or a spouse trying to get help, but they don't know how?
Man, be honest, right? If it's the spouse, let them know, hey, time for a change. That's what it took with me. Unfortunately, would I have ever gone to treatment or anything if the wife hadn't booted me out? I don't know. Probably not. But I took it real serious then. Be honest with them. Let them know, hey, this might happen. You need to make a change. Encourage them, but also be loving to them and have an answer. Hey, it's one thing to say, hey, you need to change. You need to fix yourself. Another is being able to say, hey, you need to change. And I think you need to look at this place. I think you need to have a look at these people, hear what they have to say, look at their videos, look at their documentary. And I think you need to go to this place, have an answer for them, right? I talk to people all the time on the phone. I talk to spouses all the time on the phone. A wife will call about the husband. He doesn't know I'm calling. I want to present him with an ultimatum that you need to get help, but I would like to have some kind of a place for him to go. So if you are, of the warrior class, veteran, first responder, active duty military, veteran, of course, cops, firefighters, EMTs, trauma nurses, trauma doctors, anybody serving on that front line, and you need help, give us a call. Our phone number is 866-955-4035. You can also hit us up online, warriorsheart.com/connect. We get a lot of those website forms filled out. We get live chat, and we have that 24-hour, 7 days a week hotline. Give us a call. We'll get started on it. But the most important thing is to encourage them to make a change, but also hold them accountable and let them know why they need to make a change. In our world, we don't think it's that bad. We think everything's under control. We think everything's manageable. But we find out the hard way that sometimes that life is definitely unmanageable, which is the first step. Yes. And if life is unmanageable for you, then pick up the phone, give us a call, because we can get you back on track.
So one last question, then we'll do the outro. But how do you handle guilt and rebuilding trust after recovery?
Little by little. The guilt, you will work on with your sponsor by working a solid AA program, by making amends, by doing that moral inventory. You also work on it while you're inpatient, while you're in treatment with your counselor, and find new ways to deal with that guilt. Building trust again is little by little. You can't force it. And you have to build trust with yourself first, right? Build trust with yourself first. Fix yourself first. AA is a program of attraction. Recovery is a program of attraction. right? You want to make yourself as attractive to that party that you have offended that you need to rebuild that relationship with. Attractive from the standpoint of, I'm taking care of business now. I'm not a mean, angry drunk, I'm being helpful to people. I'm straightening up my act. That's what brings people back to you. And it takes time to do that, but you have to do it for you first. You can't do it for them. Because if you are doing it just to rebuild that relationship and they say, you know what, I'm not ready for that, you may fall apart. But if you're doing it for you, fixing you, then it'll take time. Continue to do the work because, man, the reward is so beautiful.
Yes, sir. So that was Robert Greer, law enforcement veteran, Warrior's Heart advocate, and proof that rock bottom isn't the end of the story. Robert, one more time, where can people reach you or Warrior's Heart if they need help?
Call us at 866-955-4035. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We'll get started on the process, help you out. You can also log on to our website, warriorsheart.com/connect, and you can fill out an online form. You can fill out a form for your loved one, for somebody that you know that needs to get help. You can let us know, hey, can you reach out to this guy? He's struggling. We also have a live chat feature. I think we're doing a little bit of maintenance on it right now, but you can definitely log on to that as well and get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to help you out.
And before we wrap up, what's one thing you want every listener to carry into their...
It's an excellent question. That if you're struggling with it, there is a better life out there. There's a better road. Take time to take care of yourself. Let others watch the line for a little while. Take care of yourself. Get combat effective again.
Awesome. Awesome closing words. If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy. You're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Reach out to me. Reach out to somebody. Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone. Not in this job. Not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page, Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.